Hello everyone, welcome to Unacademy. Today we are going to discuss about the Hindu paper, okay? And we are going to discuss all the important topics that have appeared in the today's edition, especially the Delhi edition of the Hindu, okay? So we are going to cover it very comprehensively, and we are going to cover these topics in much required detail as per the relevance of UPSC, okay? So before we start, let us talk about first about the offer that you have in your hands. Okay. So if you are wishing to have any of the Unacademy classes, wherever you want, if you want some subscription of the Unacademy classes, so till 31st of July, there is an offer to be availed, and that is that lowest price being offered for the Unacademy courses is 16,999. Okay. But after some point of time, after 31st of July, this is bound to rise to 24,999 rupees. All right. So if you want to avail this offer and you want a discount as well, so you can use this code that is IAS English. Once you use this code, you will find that your amount has reduced by a significant discount. All right. So let us start by looking at the topics for today. Okay. So these are the topics that we are going to cover from the Hindu edition. Okay. The Delhi edition of the Hindu. And this is consisting of five topics and total of six topics in which I have included one PIB topic as well as Hindu editorial and articles. All right. So the first topic is about FCRA Bill 2026. This talks about the foreign contribution with respect to the NGOs in India. Okay. Then second is about India's theater reform needs a readiness framework. This is on page number 6. Okay. And this talks about how the defense forces need to be structured. Okay. And whether we want to, if we want to go for theaterization of the forces, if we want to go and integrate them, we have to be ready for it and we have to expect that this kind of a transition will take some kind of time for it to brought into particular effect. Third is India's refusal to uphold a global gig work law. This is on page number 7. Okay. And this talks about the convention under International Labour Organization. It is about the gig work law that India has abstained to vote for in favor of. Fourth is lingering challenges. This is on page number 6. And this talks about education, how education is being dealt since the protest of the CJP. Since the protest of CJP, the education is being dealt like a technical failure rather than academic reforms that could be used to structure it in a much better way. Fifth is India is getting ready for Xi Jinping Putin visits in September, page number 10. This relates to your international relation, according to which BRICS organization will become important and relevant for the exam. All right. Some prelims bites. We have Global Tiger Day. This is taken from your PIB. And yesterday, 29th of July, was Global Tiger Day. So we will read some important facts and what are the achievements of India in the conservation of tigers. All right. So let us start with the first topic. This is page number 6, FCRA Bill 2026. This can be mapped to the syllabus of GS paper 2 and you could find it in the governance part. All right. So let us read this. First of all, when we talk about the FCRA bill, okay, so FCRA bill, it seeks to have tighter control over foreign funded institutions. Okay. So this is a new bill. This there is an amendment that is being proposed in FCRA bill. All right. So you had FCRA bill in 1976, and then there was a revised form in 2010, and then we have this bill in 2026, right? So the recent amendment, it proposes that the foreign funded institutions like the non-governmental organizations, these need to be brought under scrutiny, and they have brought about tighter norms in which they can be funded by the foreign organizations. All right. This is understandable. This is understandable. Why? The reason being that you do not want any of the foreign sources to be anti-government or they want to be anti-incumbent, right? You do not want such kind of organizations funding non-governmental organizations which are antithetical to the welfare of the society at large, right? To control them, there are certain tighter norms. But this article goes on to argue and understand that whether these tighter norms are going to suffocate the freedom that the NGOs will. All right. So, this is the argument that we are going to discuss, the debate that is there in this article. So, let us understand it. First of all, the politics of foreign contributions. All right. So, it is not like it is a new case. Foreign contribution has always been controversial. Okay. Normally, when we talk about the foreign contributions, they are allowed in cases of humanitarian relief, okay, and particularly in sectors which are going to bring about better reforms or going to give better health facilities or education facilities or environmental protection abilities to the population of the. All right. The first time that foreign contribution FCRA bill or act was introduced was in 1976. 1976. Okay. So 1976, particularly at the time of the government of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. All right. Because they wanted to create a regulatory framework so that this utilization of foreign contributions and foreign hospitality, it should not be something that is going to be anti-government. Okay. There was a fear of foreign contributions leading to anti-government stances. Okay. And something that would be antithetical to the India's interest. Okay. So there has been politics around this foreign contributions. Primarily, it talks about the humanitarian relief. Okay. Probably most aimed at the welfare of the citizens. Okay. In first time, when we talk about the act in 1976, it was introduced during the tenure of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and it was based upon the fear of the state that there might be foreign forces that may be acting by contributing to the NGO sources through financial means and bringing about effects that can be anti-government in nature. Next, the such now the author goes on to say that such contributions were never prohibited in general. Okay. Their acceptance and utilization, it came under regulation, which became progressively stricter with every. Okay, so now he talks about the FCRA that was there in 1976. Then we moved on to the 2010, and then we have in 2026 the amendment proposed. Okay, and by the time we have reached 2026, it is becoming all the more stricter. Okay, so the primary focus of regulation in 2010 was the legislature and the political parties. All right. The government's concern mainly was that foreign sources should not contribute to interests that are anti-government in nature. Okay. So therefore, the provisions were made to prohibit the receipt of any form of foreign contribution by candidates. Okay, even the candidates who used to stand against the government in opposition or who would be contesting the elections, they must not be receiving any foreign contributions. It is because the motives of such a candidate might be motivated by the people who are offering him foreign contributions. All right, or election, media personnel, public servants, judges, government employees, members of legislatures, political parties, and their office bearers. All right. So next, when we talk about this, the vesting, when we talk about how the nature was, although it was strict, it remained regulatory in nature. Okay, the provisions under these acts, it remained regulatory in nature, and they cannot be accused. Author further goes on to say this, that the norms, the provisions that is given under the FCRA, it were mainly regulatory in nature, and these were not unduly harsh on people. Okay, unduly harsh on the recipients. Okay, so even when we talk about the application of FCRA previously, we talk about its application. Its application, though the norms might be stricter, though the provisions might be stricter, however, it wasn't as harshly implemented. Okay, so what did it provide for? It provided for vesting of assets created out of foreign contributions in a prescribed authority under certain circumstances and situations. All right. It also laid down that any person or organization engaged in definite cultural, economic, educational, religious, or social programs must obtain a certificate of registration, without which no foreign contribution could be received. All right. The simple thing here to understand is that if you are a person or an organization, if you are a person or an organization and you are receiving, if you are receiving foreign funding, okay, you can only do so. You can only do so if you have obtained a certificate of registration. Certificate of registration. If you have not received such a certificate, then you won't be entitled to this foreign contribution. All right. The second thing is that the assets that are created by foreign contributions, it has to be vested in a prescribed authority. Okay. That means that if the government finds that under certain exceptions, certain circumstances, if this foreign contribution is found to be defaulting in some of the provisions of FCRA, okay, circumstances violating FCRA provisions, in these cases, in these cases, the assets that are arising out of the foreign contributions, this has to be vested in a designated authority. Designated authority. Okay, later on, you will also learn about what this designated authority can do with the assets that is gained from such foreign contributions. All right. So basically, one is there that person or organization, if they receive foreign funding, they must obtain a certificate of registration. If they are found to be defaulting of any of the provisions given in FCRA, then their assets can be vested in a designated authority. Okay, it will be taken away from them and vested in a designated authority. All right. Now the sledgehammer effect. Now we talk about, it gives us a different picture. It is having a sledgehammer effect on the NGOs and religious and cultural organizations. Okay. Now, Act of 2010, it provides for registration of applicants and grant of certificates to receive foreign contributions. Okay, that is fine. As long as we are talking about who are the people, we must register them. Who are the people who are receiving this foreign contribution? One is registration, and second is the grant of certificates. Grant of certificates. All right. If you are receiving any foreign contribution, if your organization is receiving any foreign contribution. Now, there are different conditions under which such a certificate is issued. Okay, one of these conditions is that applicant has not been prosecuted, convicted, or found to have indulged in activities aimed at religious conversion through inducement or force, either directly or indirectly, from one faith to the other. This is condition number one. Okay, this registration and certificates is dependent upon certain conditions. Condition number one is that the applicant must not be convicted of certain things. He must not be convicted of certain things. For example, one of which is very prominently religious conversion. Okay, that means forcible religious conversion. If the person has been convicted in such a crime, then his application would be rejected. Another condition is that applicant should not be, has not been prosecuted or convicted for creating communal tension, disharmony, or similar disturbance. Okay, so he or she must not be involved in crimes that have created communal tensions or any kind of disturbance in the society which has created social disorder. All of these things, if a person is accused of such crimes, then their registration as well as certificates, these can be rejected. Now, this was under your 2010 Act. Okay, we are talking about FCRA. We started with FCRA 1976, then 2010, and now the amendment in 2026. But under the bill of 2026, if such a certificate is cancelled, the foreign contribution received by the applicant, along with all assets created out of that foreign contribution, shall be vested in a designated authority. Now, here is an important point to understand. The point to understand here is that if you are accused, if the organization or the person is accused of committing these crimes, okay, if they are accused of committing this crime, if they have committed such a crime, then what about the assets? What about the assets that have been acquired through the foreign contribution? All right, we are talking about foreign contribution has led to creation of certain assets, right? So if there is a person, if there is an NGO, they have acquired assets because they received foreign contributions. Okay. Now, because of any reason of the person or the applicant being found to be guilty of some crimes, specifically communal tensions or forcible religious conversions, then what happens to the assets that have been acquired through the foreign contributions? So, the Amendment Act of 2026, it states that these will be vested in a designated authority, in a designated authority. Okay, this means that it will not stay with the organization. All right. Next, then you have in 2010 Act, there is clause 1, subclause C of section 14. What does it say? It provides that if a certificate may be cancelled, if in the opinion of the central government, it is necessary in the public interest to do so. Okay. So number one, when we talk about clause 1C in section 14, okay, it talks about the central government having the power. Central government will have the power in case it feels that the certificate may be cancelled for an organization in public interest. Okay, this public interest is something that is going to be a bit vague. Okay, and it can create room for the central government to apply its own discretion. That means it can stop a certain NGO from receiving foreign contributions or not. Okay, so such kind of a public interest world, this can create a sense of arbitrariness at times. Okay, that is an important point to take away from here. And the consequence of such cancellation is organization loses its authority to receive foreign contributions. Its assets created out of such contributions may be taken over, and its activities may effectively come to a halt. All right. So what we are saying here that in case the central government feels that the public interest is being harmed due to the functioning or due to the functioning of or the activities of these NGOs, all right, it can rule them out. It can deny them access to foreign contributions, and their certificate may be cancelled. Okay. When the certificate is cancelled, the organization no longer can carry out its activities. It can no longer function, right? And further, whatever contributions, foreign contributions had led to acquiring of assets for these organizations, they may also be not accessible to the organization. All right. So the term public interest is vague, and this cancellation of certificate would result in vesting of foreign contribution as well as the assets that are created, and this will be given to the designated authority. Designated authority. Okay. Now, when we talk about cancellation of certificate, okay, it may also result if an individual or organization is prosecuted in connection with a case alleging religious conversion through force or inducement. Okay. So it is very easy for a person determined to have the certificate of a religious organization cancelled to file a complaint in a police station or in a court alleging forcible religious conversion. All right. So we are trying to see that how easy is the cancellation of certificate, because that is going to create problems for such kind of organizations who are receiving foreign contributions. Okay, so this cancellation of certificate can also be done if there is a person, suppose say there is a person who says that this organization that I am a part of, okay, this organization is forcibly converting people into different religions or into their own religions. Okay. If this person files a case against this organization, then also the cancellation of certificate for this organization may take place. All right. And this is something that is very easy to do. Okay. It is not something that is going to be difficult, and it is going to lead to the cancellation of certificate. Okay. So it has an immense potential for misuse. Immense potential for misuse. This is another problem. Along with this, there is one more problem that the author suggests, and that is that if a person surrenders a certificate of registration, the entire foreign contribution remaining with the person, along with all the assets created out of such contribution, will vest with the designated authority. All right. So this means that in future, okay, suppose you are not found, the person or the organization receiving the foreign contributions is not found to be committing any crimes, all right, and there is no case that is against them in such regard, all right. Other than that, even if the organization says that in future I'm not going to take any of the foreign contributions, I'm not utilizing any foreign contributions. I do not want to take any foreign contributions. In that case, also, whatever the organization has acquired in the past through foreign contributions, this will also be taken and it will be vested in the designated account. Okay. This seems to be a bit unfair. Why? Because the organization has not caused any kind of crime. Okay. It has not been accused of any of the crimes that are listed. They are not convicted of that. Okay. And simply they have said that I will discontinue the foreign contributions in the future. Okay. Then why should they be punished about the foreign contributions that have led to accumulation of assets in the past? Why should it be taken away from them and vested in a designated account? That is the point that the author is trying to argue. Okay. So a person or organization that has availed foreign contribution, that is what it says further, and created assets from them may after some time decide that it is no longer requiring the further foreign contributions and may therefore surrender itself. But this clause 16A 1B of the bill says that all assets that are created out of the foreign contribution together with any unutilized portion of such contribution shall vest with the authority. Okay, so this is another thing that has been highlighted. Then finally, when we talk about the exemption clause, okay, that means this is also going to create a problem of arbitrariness that goes against the principle of equality or equal protection of laws under the Article 14. Okay, how does it do so? It exempts an organization or class of organization or person from the operation of this bill if the government considers such an exemption to be in public interest. Again, this is a provision that has been stated, but objectively, it has not given us the parameters in which this differentiation is classified intelligibly. That means If you or someone else wants to classify the organizations in a manner and you want to exempt a certain number of organizations, what are the objective parameters based on which you will let certain organizations avail exemption or not? All right. So this points to a bit of arbitrariness at the power at the in the hands of the government. All right. So it is vulnerable to challenge under Article 14 of the Constitution, which guarantees equality before law. Equality before law. Okay. And this also should be guided by a distinction. That means whether you can create a distinction between the categories on some intelligible criteria. Okay. So it identifies any intelligible differentia and distinguishes the favored class of organization or persons from those the law applies differently in entire. All right. So, what is the rationale behind this differential treatment must also be clearly spelled out so that the principle of equality is not violated. Okay, when you are going for exempting certain organizations, you must clearly spell out the objective criteria. All right. So, this marks the end of the article. So, one of the main practice question that we can expect from this is this. This is 150 words and 10 marks. So we have regulation of foreign funding of civil society organizations must balance national interest with their autonomy. Discuss. All right. So how do we write this? In the introduction part, we can just provide for the context from the current affairs itself. All right. We can talk about the recent FCRA amendment bill. Okay. We can talk about how it can create equality before law under Article 14. All right. Or how it jeopardizes the equality before law under Article 14. Okay. In the body part of the answer, the body part, we can first write why is such, first of all, why is such regulation necessary? Okay. This can be your first heading. Okay. Herein you can write about the importance that sovereignty and national integrity, they are of importance. All right. Then it ensures that foreign political influence is limited. Okay. Then you can write about the financial transparency of such kind of organizations. Okay. It must not be opaque. It must be clearly visible that how they are operating because it could be against the public interest also. All right. Then you can write about trying to create communal harmony. Okay. Then you can talk about excessive regulation. What can excessive regulation do and how can it go wrong? Okay. So whatever we have mentioned in the article, you can mention as points in this excessive regulation. All right. Then I would suggest write a few points as way forward. All right. Way forward, what should be the go-to measure? For example, you should have criteria, objective criteria for exemption. All right. Then you could write about the proportionate penalties. Okay. That means even when you have a certain organization which is violating the norms in certain cases, then also it should be proportionate. It should not just lead to taking away of all the assets acquired by the foreign institution. And lastly, you must write conclusion. Okay. So you can talk about the regulatory framework which balances both equality before law under Article 14, national interest, and public interest. All right. So this is how you can write an answer for this. All right. Now let us move to the next article. This is GS3. This is security forces and agencies. All right. This is on page number 6. This talks about India's theater reform. It needs a readiness framework. Okay. So what is theaterization? First of all, we must understand that theaterization wants to transform the India services into an integrated thing. Okay. Earlier, you will find that the commands will work differently. Okay. They will not be integrated with each other. Okay. When we talk about theaterization, we want to understand what these forces are capable of when they are integrated. Okay. That is what theaterization would be. All right. So there has been move towards theaterization. That means let us go for integrated application of all the armed forces that we have. All right. But the author here says that this integration will require some time. Okay. Because this is the time required for the transition. Okay. The government cannot expect that this transition can be expedited. It is just a change in structure, and from the next day, you can see the effect. Okay, it is not going to happen like that. There is some time that will be required for the trans- uh, transition of these events. Okay, so let us read about this. First is India's theaterization is nearing completion. Okay, other countries like United States and United Kingdom and China, they've already made the shift. Okay. And this is something that has been observed in the modern warfare also, the modern conflicts. It favors integrated structures over single service models. All right. So it is not wise right now in this modern world. It is not wise to have only single service models. That means only one of the armed forces, they are operating in silos. Okay, they are operating in an isolated manner. They must be integrated for you to show more amount of effect. Now, this may temporarily reduce operational readiness, right? Because we are moving from one model to another model, and this transition, it may not be as smooth as it is expected. And therefore, we must expect that there must be some amount of time. There would be some amount of time required for this transition. Okay. And we are talking about it is not an easy task. It is going to be a bit of a difficult task. We are talking about merger of 17 single service commands into three integrated theaters. It carries three real risks. What are these risks? Let us know. What are these risks? So first is the knowledge gap. First comes the knowledge gaps. Okay, so it basically points to this direction that if there is a theater commander, okay, he will command the forces from the three different services. All right, he may be having the domain expertise in one of them. All right, so there is a theater commander. Okay, he belongs to one of the services. All right, but he is asked to operate all the three services. Okay, in an integrated manner. Okay, he has domain expertise only in one. What about these two expertises? Okay, so there is a considerable knowledge gap that is to be seen. Okay? He further says that the staff may be able to help him. However, in situations where there is current war that is going on, there needs to be fast-paced decision making. And in these kind of cases, there might be a bit of a breakdown when such kind of transition is observed. So knowledge gap is a real thing that is to be said there. The second thing he talks about is that each service will have their unique values and cultures. Okay. Right now, everything is set according to the discipline, according to the merit. Okay. Everyone knows when they are going to be promoted. However, when you go for integration into theater command, it can worry the people who are part of these forces about career progression, their rank equivalence, when they come into the forces. Okay, whether they will be treated as equivalent to other forces, or whether they will be treated inferior to them, or whether any other kind of a case will emerge. Okay, so this can hurt the morale and motivation, and this is going to create problems in active combat also. Okay, this is a third. This is his first risk. This is the second risk, and the third risk is slower decision making. Slower decision making. The reason is that there has been an additional layer. In the peace times, you will find that there is VCDS, that is Vice Chief of Defense Staff, along with the Chief of Defense Staff, which adds a layer between theater commanders and Raksha Mantri. Okay, that is the defense minister. So it is like this: the defense minister, okay, and then you will have CDS, VCDS, all right, Vice Chair, Chief of Defense Staff. Then you will have theater command. All right. So in the peace times, in the times of peace, you will find that the theater commander will report to the channels of the defense minister through CDS and VCDS. All right. However, once a war begins, you'll find that the theater commander is directly reporting to the Raksha Mantri or the defense minister. Right. So this untested structure, it cannot be suddenly switching on under the fire and the peacetime habits. Okay, it destroys a routine structure. All right. And moreover, adding one more layer, it can also slow the decision making process. Oftentimes, you'll find in cases of war, we need to make the decisions very, very quickly. All right. So he mentions these three risks going forward in this transition. And he also gives a disclaimer. The disclaimer is given that it does not argue against the theater cuts. Okay, it does not argue against that we must not have theaterization. He does not go on to say that. He says that it talks about readiness. Okay, that means how should this transition take place? Right? This short-term readiness talks about there is no time to recover once fighting starts. And this risk, all these three risks that we talked about, it can compound even further when these gaps in data links, jointness, and logistics, these are observed. All right. So it is about scaling of the problem at the level along with the transition that can create a problem in the readiness of the defenses. All right. Now the question is how much and for how long? Okay, that is this transition is there. Yes, we move from single service model to theaterization. Okay. However, this transition that we are bringing into effect, how much time is it going to take? All right. So first he talks about it is rough but a useful distinction. First is the nature of change. Okay, that means he talks about to have any changes in the weapons platform. Okay, that means you have changes in weapons. That means your weaponry is getting upgraded. So this can be done within months. Okay, there is no problem in that. Within months, weapons upgrade can be done. All right. Second thing is those touching structures such as the Andaman and Nicobar command, it took a decade. So theaterization is in the second category. All right. So he says that if we have to guess, if we have to find out how much time would this transition to a perfect theaterization would take, it can take from a decade or more. All right. So we can learn from Andaman and Nicobar command. It took over a decade. The second thing is what is the scale of delay? All right. So the current plan may take 2 or 3 years, while full transition could take a decade or more. Okay. It learns from the experiences of China. Okay. You know, the China created theater commands in 2 years and US in 10. Okay. So similar time period or timelines can be observed for the transition to theaterization as well. And third is the timing. Okay. It is not like we are living it with peaceful neighbors. All right. We are facing pressure on the two fronts. Okay. When we talk about Pakistan and China. Okay, with China, we have an unresolved border dispute, okay, boundary problems. Okay, and with respect to Pakistan, we have a range of problems like cross-border terrorism that we need to keep an eye on. All right. So all of this may lead to a longer period of time in which we adopt categorization, and this complete transition leads to perfect implementation of this command. Okay. So right now, Indian defense planning, the problem with this, the problem that he wants to highlight is that we often feel that the reforms, okay, whatever the structural reforms of theaterization is required, if we just bring it into effect, it will start functioning on its own. Okay, it says that we often treat it as a self-executing structure plan. Okay, so we have to talk about a military readiness framework. That means we just don't have to talk about how the defenses are. Okay. We don't have to talk about the quantitative of the weapons or quantity of soldiers, numbers of soldiers that we have, or the numbers of weapons that we have. We must also talk about readiness. How ready is our military to fight a war if it has to fight a war tomorrow? All right. What is this framework? You have to define. Okay. Only then you will be able to say whether you are ready for this transition and how long will this transition take place. The first is the metrics that we must have. That means it must have a public statement on joint force must be ready to fight if it is essential. All right. And this must account for the two front threat that can quietly become into a two and a half if left unaddressed. Okay. This is about the borders and the hostile neighbors. Then we talk about the second, the standards that measure force structures against operational demands. So right now we are measuring, okay, we are talking about India. We measure our force structures based upon the inputs like money. How much money do we have to spend? Okay, how much of manpower? What are the abilities or capabilities of our machines? And what materials do we have? All right. Now, this needs to change. It needs to change and it needs to bring in three elements. That is, what is the unit level readiness? What is the force readiness? And what is the sustainability when we talk about increasing capacity? Okay. That means if you want to scale it, how sustainably can we scale it? The third is that India also needs mechanisms to compel policymakers to notice and act. Okay, so we can create a readiness oversight council. Okay, this is similar to what US created. Okay, readiness oversight council. Fourth is the hedging transition itself. Okay, by the time we reach the complete theaterization, by the time it is brought into complete effect, we will notice that we might be attacked by our hostile neighbors. In that kind of a case, let us also have a reserve force on standby. Okay, so this reserve force outside the new structure. So short wars are not fought entirely on untested grounds. All right. That is, we do not expose our risks to these short wars or the hostilities that is given by the. All right. So this page 7, next topic is about India's refusal to uphold a global gig work law. This is on page 7 and this relates to your social justice. All right. So when we talk about global gig work law, all right, you would remember that labor code was introduced in India. Okay. It is something that has been introduced in India. And also labor belongs to concurrent list, which means that both the center as well as the states can legislate over these. All right. Labor is an important criteria when we consider about the ease of doing business. This is because when you come into a country like India, you will have to honor the labor laws that has been constituted for their welfare. All right. So when we talk about ease of doing business, it can create barriers or it can create easiness of operating your businesses when these labor laws are uniformly placed in a consolidated legislation. All right. So now the news is that India has refused to uphold a global gig work law. Now, this, why are we saying global? Because it relates to ILO. This is your International Labour Organization. This India India is a founding member. All right. So in prelims also, you have been asked this question. You have been asked about what are the conventions that India has ratified in ILO. All right. So let us learn about this. So first is International Labour Conference. It adopted convention number 193. What does it relate to? It talks about the decent work in the platform economy. Okay. So we are talking about the gig works, right? Now it has to be seen because it is the first binding international treaty. It is written for riders, driver, picker, data laborer who earns a living through an app. Okay, basically we are talking about those delivery partners who are operating through an app. All right. So mainly, if I have to quote an example, mainly about the aggregator apps. Okay. Suppose you talk about food delivery. Okay. Who's the person who delivers your food? Okay. He will be counted within it. Who's the person who picks you up from a point and also drops you at your destination? Okay. That is also going to be counted over here. Okay. Now this when we talk about this decent work in platform economy, this was voted in favor by a number of nations, 406. But India abstained. And that is why we have it in news. Okay, India abstained, and it has considerable number of people who drive or who ride or who deliver food who are partners with these food apps, with transportation apps, and so on. Okay, but India has abstained. There is another side to this because when we talk about ILO's ratification, it is actually a tripartite system. Tripartite system. It means it is three parties which will vote from India's side. One would be India's government. Okay. Then you will also talk about the people, employer, and the worker delegates. Okay? So one is India at the level of the nation. Second is employer. Third is worker delegate. And they voted in favor. Okay, they voted in favor. So three systems: India, then employer and worker. India abstained. Okay, they too voted in favor. All right. So it has become a news. So let us study what is there. What are the details? So, Convention number 193 does what India's own laws refuse to. Okay, it extends a floor of rights to platform workers regardless of classification, even if a company calls them employees or independent partners. All right. So, what does the convention number 193 say? Convention number 193 for platform workers, it states that even if an aggregator calls its delivery partners, they do not call them their employees or they call them their independent partners, then also they employees, the persons who are working on these platforms, they must also have certain amount of rights. Okay? To not have these rights is something that is violative of this convention. All right. So this means what are such kind of rights? That they must be paid as per the statutory or the negotiated minimum. Okay, that means there is a concept of minimum wage. That means you can be paid only above this wages. It is usually linked to how inflation is affecting the economy. Then second is on-time payment. It should not be as if that you have done the work for today and you are receiving the payment of your work a week later or 2 months later, right? Third thing is about occupational safety and health. Okay, that means when you are carrying out this profession or occupation, then you should not be affected with respect to your health, or there should be minimal risk to your health. And if there are risks, then you should be provided with adequate safeguards so that you do not catch any kind of disease or you're not caught in an accident. And then we talk about social security on terms which no less favorable than what comparable workers receive. It applies to all. So basically, this convention would say that these benefits that are given to the workers of the company, it should also be given to the platform workers. All right. There should not be distinction. There should be rights that should be made available to the platform workers also. Now, going forward, it also enters territory of no global standard has touched, and that is your algorithmic management. So the thing here is that it talks about algorithmic management as well. All right. So it says basically that when we talk about these apps, okay, what are these apps responsible for? For allocation of work. Okay. It will tell, suppose say we are talking about a food delivery app. All right. So it will search for an independent partner or delivery partner. All right. Once this delivery partner is located, it will allocate the work to them. Okay. And then once the work is done, there would be payment for the services. All right. So this is done by what? It is done not by human intervention, it is done by algorithm. All right. So this convention points out algorithm management, wherein the allocation of work is automated. Okay. It can define that how much a person will be able to earn in a day. Also, through this algorithm management, it will also carry out if there is any kind of violation, then the platform worker can lose his access to the profile. Okay, means he is no longer allowed to deliver his services. Okay, in such kind of cases, some workers will have their livelihood income depending on these apps. Okay, and if their membership is cancelled, if their profile is banned, if their account is banned, then how will they earn their livelihood income? Okay, so this means that they must have certain rights. All right, so that is what it talks about. It silently deactivates the accounts, and platforms must know now disclose significant automated decisions, explain them in writing. Okay, so there must be transparency when you are talking about automated decisions, and you must keep a human in loop. All right. So the government must classify workers correctly, guided mainly by the facts relating to performance of the work. Next, it talks about the problem at hand which India is facing because we have a huge number of workforce who are a part who are working in the gig workforce. Right. So India's gig workforce, this is important data for us, 7.7 million in 2020 to 21. And Niti Aayog projection is that by 2029 30, there will be 2.35 crores of gig workers. All right. Niti Aayog data also tells us how much do they earn. A number of people, 39% of the gig workers earn from 10,000 rupees to 25,000 rupees a month. Okay. Another 34% earn 25,000 to 40,000 rupees per month. All right. Now, this income, it is not something that they take home. It is something that is going to be also having deductions in the kind of fuel paid. Okay. No overtime that is being paid. And he also talks about the employment quality. That means although they are earning, there are certain amounts of earning, but the employment quality has degraded. That means a long working hours are there. There is no overtime wages that are given. Okay. Only 15% have any kind of social security. All right. So they are at huge risk. All right. Although India has some code on social security that is given by 2020, we talked about labor code. Okay. Labor codes will have this four codes. There are four codes, out of which one is the code on social security. Social security. Okay. And we were among the first ones in the world to bring about this in our central law to define gig worker and platform workers. Okay. It was also said within these codes that the aggregators or the people who are there in the who are owning the app, they must of their annual turnover, 1 to 2%, they must be contributing and capped at 5% of worker payouts into a social security fund. The social security fund was to lower the kind of risks that the worker are facing, okay, to provide them with social security. However, you will find that the contribution is not being implemented as rigorously. There is problem of implementation. The second thing is that central law or the state laws, they do not specify the nature or quantum or eligibility of benefits. This contribution mechanism by the aggregator apps into the Social Security Fund, it remains largely unoperationalized and schemes are notional. All right. So this means the Social Security Fund, which was regarded to be contributed by the aggregator apps, this is for creating and reducing. It was for reducing the risks for the platform workers. It has not been operationalized as such. All right. But we do see that there are certain states which have worked in the welfare of these platform workers. And we have example from Rajasthan. Rajasthan's platform-based gig workers act of 2023, and then you have welfare boards that are drafted in Karnataka and Telangana. All right. Now to sum it up, we have to see that India did not ratify or India abstained from voting in this case. Okay, this is convention number 193. All right. Although India is a founding member, okay, it means it aligns to the principles in the ILO. Okay. It has also ratified six of the eight core conventions. Okay. What are the two conventions that we have not ratified? The two conventions is convention number 87. Please remember this number. And that is relating to freedom of association. And number 98. This is right to organize and collective bargaining. Okay. And there is a reason to. There is a reason that we do not want our government's servants to have a right to strike. Okay. There is domestic rules which will not allow them. Nor has it ratified Convention number 190 on violence and harassment at work. All right. So it is something that has become unsettling. We have not ratified it. All right, and we have abstained from it when the other parties have voted for it in much greater numbers, right? But there is something that we have to understand, that India always goes for ratification only when it has these provisions within embedded within its domestic laws. If it does not have so, then it won't be fruitful for India to ratify, right? So this endorse has a settled posture. That means endorse the principle but withhold the obligation. All right. And then there is federalism argument too. That means labor is a concurrent subject. First is this. The second is that if you want to have such kind of a law put into place, then you must have certain suggestions taken from the states as well, because labor is a concurrent subject. All right. But abstention does not protect federalism. Okay, we have seen that there are states who are willing for it. Okay, and the center could very well go ahead and ratify it. All right. So this is about ILO. All right. Now moving on to the next topic, that is on page 6, GS2. This is your lingering challenges. Okay, this is about education. Okay. So we have seen in the recent times there has been a huge protest against the leakage of paper. Okay, that means there was reforms that were required when we talk about the conducting of papers. All right. But these educational reforms that we talk about, this has come as a reaction to the technical failure. Technical failure. Okay. Rather, we should consider the educational reforms, whatever the processes of conducting tests are, we should rather consider it in an academic light as well. All right. So we are talking about we are treating this failure as a technical failure. However, it has to be regarded, it has to be understood in the academic light also. Okay, so this article tries to understand in this light. All right. So first thing is, this is the crisis management. It is based on a dysfunctional architecture. This kind of a keyword is very important and can be used in your mains answer. Dysfunctional architecture. Okay. So this NTA, that is National Testing Agency, the task force is expected to operationalize the K. Radhakrishnan Committee's October 2024 blue. Much of it was stalled for the last 18 months, right? So what does it require? What does this committee has recommended? It has recommended a statutory. That means it must be backed by law. UPSC like NTA under a Director General and two ADGs, that is Additional Director Generals. Okay, so there should be DG and two ADGs, and there would be 10 functional verticals. 10 functional verticals when we talk about cybersecurity, psychometrics, forensics, 1,000 standardized testing centers, a digi exam biometric framework to identify whether the person who is coming to give the exam is the right person or not. Okay. Integrating Aadhaar, facial recognition, and continuous surveillance. All right. So all of this should be backed by law. That means it should be statute. This is the recommendation. All right. Now notice that we talk about this as a technical failure. That means should we bring about any kind of changes so that these uh, technical failures can be done away with, right? Now, one is there are structural changes. All right. So there are long cycles when we are talking about bringing about these reforms. You have 6 to 12 months of recruitment cycle. There are pay scales which cannot compete with those in the private sector. Okay, who will come to uh, head these kind of organizations if you're not paying adequately or if you're not paying something that is comparable to the private sector? Okay. And then cadre creation requiring legislative sanction. That means you should have statutory backing to it. Now, the panel also noted that the agencies such as National Medical Council and the IITs are treated as passive clients in the exam cycle. This is important for us. This is important. Why? Because we realize that we are not talking about including the IITs or the National Medical Commission in the process of conducting this exam or over thinking about what kind of improvements can be brought about in conducting these tests. All right. If we had included them, then we may have found that there are certain academic reforms that can also be brought about in these assessment tests. All right. So now, right now, we are just treating this as a technical problem. However, we could also assess how much of academic assessment could be done in this regard as well. Okay. Now, JE, when we talk about IIT JE, okay. Now, when we talk about JE, the exam, the IIT faculty who sees it as an integrity as intrinsic to the brand they have a stake in. Okay. When we talk about the approach in JE as compared to the NTA, okay, as compared to the NEET exam, all right. There's a distinction that has been brought forward for JE and NEET. We find that the educators here or the faculty here, they are the ones that will question you on the fundamental aspects. Okay. And they have a considerable amount of integrity. Okay. They see that they are part of this institution and they have this integrity, this professional integrity to uphold when they are conducting this exam. Okay. When they are giving you the questions. And that is why the level of the questions that you see in J is up to the mark. Okay. However, that is not something that happens on NEET. For NEET, the question banks are mixed and matched algorithmically. Okay. So this means there are question banks. Okay. Now these question banks can be sourced from various different sources. And this provides an opportunity for unholy nexus unholy nexus between the coaching classes, and there can be a potential for mischief. Okay. What could be a possible reform? Just like you introduce faculty for creating these fundamental aspects in the question papers, you could introduce aims institutions. Okay. It could be plausibly be interested with neat paper setting each year. All right. So this was the news about the reforms that is needed. It should more be in the light of academic reforms. Okay, not just the process of conducting the exam, but also introducing more quality in the questions of these examinations. All right. Now we come on to the next. That is on page 10. This is from your GS2 International Relations. This is India getting ready for Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin visits in September. Okay, this is regarding the BRICS summit. So let us read about it. So first of all, the BRICS summit is to be held in Delhi on September 12 and 13. And there has been a number of high level interactions regarding the same. Okay. So our foreign secretary, Vikram Misri, has held a series of talks in Beijing during which both sides have discussed strengthening high level interactions. Okay. We have to notice that this is an important meeting that is going to take place. The reason being that Xi Jinping has not visited India in last few years. All right. And it has been somewhat of a border dispute that has led to tensions between the two countries. Okay? And the visit by this time of the Chinese President Xi Jinping, it marks a departure from the hostile tensions that have been paving the path of India and China. Now it might be going towards some kind of peaceful relationship between the two nations. All right. What is important for us to note here is what is BRICS, first of all. All right. So it brings together 11 major emerging markets and developing countries of the world. Okay. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, this is Russia, India, China, and South Africa. South Africa. All right. Apart from that, you have a number of other nations which are also brought about in this platform. Okay. You have Egypt, you have Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. All right. It is a significant organization. The reason being that 49.5% population, the global population is represented by this platform. It marks the 40% of the global GDP and 26% of the global trade. Please remember these numbers. These are very, very important numbers when we talk about or when we are trying to introduce BRICS in an answer. All right. When there are high level interactions, so both the sides, whether it is the Chinese side or whether it is the side from the Ministry of External Affairs, we have said that we are going for improving the bilateral relations through these high level interactions. All right. So it is significant why Mr. Z did not attend the BRICS summit in Brazil last year, again deputing Mr. Lee to the to represent China in his stead. And now he he did, however, attend the summits in 2023 in South Africa and in 2024 in Russia, where his talks with Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, has paved the way for subsequent gradual normalization of relations. So this in September, it is expected that we might come forward with some types of normalization of relations after huge amount of tensions that has been created due to the border clashes. All right. Now, coming to some prelims parts. Okay. Yesterday was the Global Tiger Day. Global Tiger Day. All right. And therefore, this takes place on 29th of July. All right. So this is something that has been taken from the PIB. All right. So let us learn some facts that are important for us to know from prelims point of view. Okay. So first of all, Global Tiger Day, it is observed every year on 29th of July. It is established at St. Petersburg Tiger Summit in 2010. Okay. Third fact is that 13 tiger range countries they launched the global tiger recovery program. Okay, 13 tiger range countries are there. And when we talk about the population of tiger, okay, it is a census that we take every 4 years, right? So India currently has 3,682 tigers and 58 tiger reserves, right? You would be surprised to understand or know that initially when we started this program, when the Project Tiger was started where? It was started in 1973. All right. So it started in 1973 with 1,411 tigers. All right. So right now we have 3,682 tigers. Okay. We have most of the population of tigers globally. All right. There is a TX2 goal also. That means tigers into two. That means doubling the global wild tiger population by 2022. All right. So these are some important facts. There is also a launch of web page of NTCA Ecotourism. What is NTCA? NTCA stands for National Tiger Conservation Authority. Okay, this National Tiger Conservation Authority was launched in the year 2006. So this means NTCA is a statutory body. But sir, under which act? It is under Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Okay, Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So this web page was launched on Global Tiger Day. What is the utility of this page? It is carrying all the integrated information on all tiger reserves. If you want to book any kind of packages or for safari, if you want to visit and go for tiger sightseeing, you will have direct links for that. On this website, you will also see that they will promote responsible and sustainable nature-based tourism. Okay, this is like ecotourism, in which we are talking about a revenue stream also through the tourists, but also we are talking about protection of environment. One more thing is that is very, very important. That is International Big Cat Alliance. It was highlighted as a platform for international knowledge sharing on the big cat conservation. Okay. Now, some facts about the tiger crisis that has been taking place globally also. This you should know. That is around 1 lakh wild tigers existed across Asia a century ago. Okay. And right now, tigers now occupy less than 8% of their historical range. Okay. And there are three tiger subspecies that are extinct. Which are the ones that are extinct? The Bali tiger is extinct, Javan tiger, and Caspian tiger. All of these are extinct. Please try to remember the extinct ones. What are the major threats? It is mainly due to poaching. Okay. That means it was used as trophy also before the Wildlife Protection Act came in 1972 and prohibited any kind of hunting. And then you have illegal wildlife trade, trading for their parts, skin, and so on. Habitat loss and fragmentation, we see that a huge amount of infrastructure or urbanization is creating problems to the habitat of the tigers. All right. And therefore, you will find that a lot of tigers who are there in the tiger reserves, they will move out because of lack of space or resources. This creates opportunity for human wildlife conflict. Okay, that means it will come into contact with the property, with the cattle's livestock of the humans. Okay, and climate change is also causing a huge amount of degradation, habitat degradation to these tigers. All right. So here on we come to the end of this discussion. I hope you have understood everything. If you have not understood, please write it in the comment box and we will get back to you. Thank you so much.